Walking through the nearby park, she found a quiet bench and sat down, her music case resting beside her. The world felt calm, almost surreal after the intensity of the auditions. She took a deep breath, letting herself reflect on everything that had just happened. She thought about the laughter, the dismissive comments, the skepticism she had faced. Those moments no longer felt painful. Instead, they were stepping stones, reminders that every challenge she had overcome had led to this moment of accomplishment. She smiled softly. Realizing that the judgment of others had no power over her determination and talent, her mind wandered to the people who had encouraged her. Throughout her journey, the mentors who believed in her, the family members who quietly supported her late-night practices, and the friends who listened patiently as she rehearsed countless times. She felt gratitude wash over her. Their faith in her had been a foundation she could rely on when the world seemed skeptical or dismissive. She knew that this performance, this moment of recognition, was not just hers alone, but also a reflection of the support and encouragement she had received along the way. The park was filled with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of children playing. She felt an inner peace as she thought about her journey. The music had not only proven her abilities to others, but also solidified her belief in herself. Every challenge, every hour of practice, every moment of self-doubt had been worth it. She realized that the journey itself was as valuable as the performance, teaching her resilience, patience, and the power of persistence. The music was a voice, but it was also a teacher, guiding her through every step and showing her the strength she carried within. She opened her notebook and flipped through the pages, noticing the worn edges and countless scribbles. Each mark represented a lesson, a memory, a small victory, or a setback that she had transformed into growth. She recalled the nights spent in solitude, fingers aching, eyes tired from concentration, and heart heavy with doubt. Yet, those moments had built her resilience, and she had emerged stronger. She smiled, thinking of how far she had come and how much further she could go. The music had been a companion, a mentor, and a mirror, reflecting both her determination and her growth. As she returned to her seat, she felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She was exhausted, yet exhilarated, aware that she had given everything she had to the performance. She glanced around the room, seeing the reactions of the judges, the audience, and even the other contestants. Some of them seemed reflective, others genuinely impressed, and a few appeared inspired. She realized that her music had not only showcased her skill, but it also touched people, creating an emotional connection that went beyond technical proficiency. Sitting quietly, she let herself absorb the moment. The applause had faded, but the sense of accomplishment remained. She had proven to herself that she could overcome doubt, fear, and ridicule. She had shown that her talent and dedication could command respect and attention. More importantly, she had shared her story through her music, letting others see the person behind the performance. It was a powerful realization, one that strengthened her resolve and motivated her to continue pursuing her passion with even greater determination. She thought about what lay ahead. The competition wasn't over, and there would be more challenges, more opportunities to test herself and grow. But in this moment, she felt unstoppable. She had silenced the room, captured hearts, and made her mark in a way that went beyond winning or losing. She had connected with people through her music, and that connection was something she would carry with her forever. It was proof that perseverance, passion, and authenticity could overcome doubt and skepticism, and that even the smallest, most overlooked performer could command attention and respect through talent and dedication. She approached the final performance with a calm determination that surprised even herself. The earlier applause and recognition had strengthened her confidence, but she knew that the last impression mattered most. The room was charged with quiet anticipation. The judges were watching intently, the other contestants had grown silent, and even the audience seemed to lean forward in expectation. She adjusted her position at the piano, taking a deep breath and letting her fingers hover above the keys. She knew that what she was about to play would define the culmination of her journey in this audition. Her first notes were soft and deliberate, like gentle footsteps across a quiet room. Each one resonated, filling the hall with a warmth that made the audience sit up and take notice. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her. The first chords were familiar, drawn from hours of practice and countless nights spent alone in her room. But there was something different now. This wasn't just repetition. It was the emotion of the moment, the intensity of all she had experienced. Flowing through her fingertips and into the room, she felt herself becoming one with the music. Each note a reflection of her determination, her struggles, and her hope as she continued. The piece began to take on layers of complexity. Soft passages gave way to stronger, more dramatic sections, and her fingers moved with precision and passion. She could feel the room responding. The judges leaned in, pens paused, expressions of awe replacing any hint of doubt. The other contestants watched in silence, some with mouths slightly open, others with eyes wide in admiration. The laughter and sneers from earlier performances were gone, replaced by a quiet reverence. She smiled slightly to herself, understanding that this was the true power of music. It could silence judgment, melt away skepticism, and connect people in a shared experience. Midway through the performance, she allowed her emotions to shape the music more freely. The rhythm shifted subtly, rising and falling with the narrative she had created in her mind. Each chord, each delicate trill, was intentional, carrying meaning beyond the sound itself. She thought about every moment that had led her here, the self-doubt, the ridicule, the hours of lonely practice, and the tiny victories along the way. Those memories fueled her playing, giving it depth and authenticity that could not be imitated. The audience, now completely absorbed, responded with subtle shifts. A quick intake of breath here, a slight nod there, a tear glimmering in an eye. She felt the impact of her music on the hearts around her. It strengthened her resolve. The energy in the room built gradually, and she felt a surge of confidence. Her fingers danced across the keys with a grace that came from years of dedication. She allowed herself to fully immerse in the emotion, letting it guide every movement. The judges watched intently, their faces reflecting a growing appreciation for not only her skill, but the way she had transformed the room with her performance. The other contestants, who had once seemed so confident and dismissive, now seemed humbled, their earlier arrogance replaced with respect. She had achieved something beyond technical mastery. She had conveyed her story in a way that words could never capture. The climax of the piece approached, and she increased the intensity, letting her emotions surge through her fingers. Powerful chords resonated through the hall, echoing off the walls in gentle, flowing melodies interwove seamlessly, creating a tapestry of sound that filled every corner of the room. The energy was palpable. She could sense the audience leaning forward, completely absorbed, their focus unbroken. The judges were no longer just evaluating. They were experiencing the music, feeling the story that she was telling. She played with controlled strength, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. The piece reached its peak, a crescendo that seemed to capture every emotion she had experienced on her journey. Finally, she brought the music to a gentle, deliberate conclusion. The final chords were soft but resonant, allowing the sound to linger and settle naturally. She let her hands rest on the keys for a moment, feeling the room hold its breath in quiet awe. The impact of the performance was profound, and the silence that followed was filled with anticipation and reflection. Every eye in the room was on her, every heart connected to the story she had told through her music. She had transcended simple performance. She had created a shared experience that no one would soon forget. Then the applause began. It started softly, tentative at first, then grew stronger and more enthusiastic, filling the room with a wave of appreciation. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and relief. This was the recognition she had longed for, not just as validation of her talent, but as acknowledgement of her dedication, perseverance, and authenticity. She had faced ridicule and doubt, and through sheer determination and passion, she had transformed skepticism into admiration. Every hour of practice, every moment of self-doubt, every challenge she had faced had led to this moment of triumph. As she stood and bowed slightly to the audience and judges, she felt a profound sense of connection. She glanced at the other contestants, seeing their reactions. Some were inspired, others humbled, and a few deeply moved. She realized that her performance had not only showcased her abilities, but it also left an impression on everyone present. A memory that would remain with them long after the final note had faded. She had proven, in the most authentic way, that talent, dedication, and passion could overcome judgment and skepticism. Walking away from the piano for the final time, she felt a quiet confidence settle over her. The adrenaline had calmed, replaced by a sense of fulfillment and pride. She had achieved something far greater than winning an audition. She had touched lives, shared her story, and shown that even those overlooked or underestimated could command respect and admiration through skill, perseverance, and authenticity. She carried that realization with her, knowing it would guide her through future challenges and opportunities, reminding her always of the power of belief in oneself and the transformative strength of music. After the final performance, the hall slowly emptied, leaving her alone for a moment in the quiet aftermath. The echoes of the applause still lingered in her ears, and the weight of everything she had accomplished began to settle in her chest. She walked slowly toward the exit, her hands brushing along the polished wood of the piano, as if to say a quiet goodbye. The experience had been transformative. She could feel a subtle shift in herself, something more than confidence, more than pride. It was a deep, enduring sense of achievement and self-recognition, a proof to herself that she could rise above doubt and skepticism as she left the building. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the street, warm and bright. People passed by without noticing her, but she didn't mind. She felt as if the world around her had shifted slightly. Every step she took carried the weight of her journey, the hours of practice, the moments of uncertainty, and the triumph of finally being seen and heard. She recalled the faces of the judges, the subtle nods of approval, the smiles of appreciation, and the awe of the audience. Each of these small gestures reinforced the reality that her music had left an impact far greater than she had ever imagined. The first notes of her next piece were soft, delicate, almost hesitant, but deliberate. She let the music speak for itself, flowing naturally from her mind to her fingers and into the room. She could sense the subtle shift in energy as the judges leaned forward slightly, no longer just observing but beginning to feel. The other contestants watched with a mix of surprise and quiet admiration, realizing that her talent wasn't just skill, it was something deeper, something intangible. She played each phrase with care, emphasizing emotion over speed. Letting the melody breathe and expand, her confidence grew as the piece progressed. She was no longer thinking about the audience or the judges. She was immersed in the music and the story she wanted to tell. The room seemed to respond, the silence deepening, every note resonating with a subtle but undeniable power. She noticed small changes around her, a judge leaning closer, eyes bright with interest, another tapping a pen thoughtfully, a few contestants exchanging glances of awe. Her music had captured attention. She felt a quiet pride in her ability to connect. She continued to play, letting her emotions guide her fingers, each chord carrying a fragment of her story. She thought about the moments that had brought her here, the doubts, the sacrifices, the hours of practice when no one believed she could achieve this. Each of those memories fueled her performance, giving it depth and sincerity. The sound filled the room, soft at times, powerful at others, creating a rhythm that mirrored the ebb and flow of her journey. It was as if the piano had become an extension of herself, speaking in a language that everyone could understand. The audience was completely captivated now. The whispers and subtle movements that had accompanied other performances were gone, replaced by focused attention. She could see the impact her music was having. Even those who had doubted her, who had laughed earlier, were now silent, absorbed in the story she was telling through her fingers. The emotional power of the performance was undeniable, and she felt it ripple through the room. Connecting everyone in a shared experience, she approached the climax of the piece with a steady hand and a clear mind. The notes became more complex, layered with emotion, and yet she maintained control, letting the music flow naturally. Each chord struck with purpose, each pause deliberate, creating a tension that held the audience in suspense. She could see the judges exchanging quick, impressed glances, their pens pausing mid-note as they absorbed the performance. The room was entirely hers, a space where music and emotion intertwined seamlessly. As she reached the final few measures, she felt a surge of energy. Her fingers moved with precision and feeling, each note resonating deeply. The piece built to a gentle but powerful conclusion, every sound intentional, every pause meaningful. She allowed the final chord to linger, giving it time to breathe, to settle in the hearts of everyone listening. The silence afterward was profound, filled with the weight of everything she had expressed through her performance. She lifted her hands slowly, savoring the moment and the connection she had created. The reaction was immediate. Applause broke out, starting slowly and hesitantly, then growing into a warm, enthusiastic wave. She smiled softly, feeling a mix of relief and pride. This wasn't just about winning or impressing the judges. It was about being seen, about communicating something real and meaningful. The respect and admiration in the room were undeniable. She felt a deep satisfaction knowing that she had achieved something profound. She had turned doubt and laughter into awe and recognition. Returning to her seat, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. The music still echoed in her mind, a reminder of the power she had to touch hearts and create connection. She glanced at the other contestants, noticing the quiet change in their demeanor. Some seemed inspired, others reflective, but all had witnessed something extraordinary. She had faced skepticism, laughter, and judgment, and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more certain of her abilities. This was more than an audition. It was a moment that would stay with her forever. As she sat quietly, letting the applause die down, she realized that this experience had changed her. She was no longer just a hopeful contestant. She was a musician who could command attention, convey emotion, and leave a lasting impression. The journey ahead would have its challenges, but she now knew that her talent, perseverance, and authenticity were powerful tools. She had faced the laughter and doubt and had silenced the room with her music, proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged in that space. And in that quiet realization, she felt a sense of peace and determination that would carry her forward. She walked back to the piano for her next piece, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm determination. The earlier applause and recognition had settled into her mind, giving her confidence, but she knew she couldn't rely on the past to carry her forward. Each note she played had to be intentional, each phrase a reflection of her passion and skill. The room seemed quieter than before, as if everyone sensed something important was about to happen. The judges, who had once been polite but reserved, now watched her closely, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Even the other contestants, who had laughed at her initially, now appeared nervous and cautious. Aware that she was capable of something extraordinary, she took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. Feeling the familiar texture and weight of each one, her mind focused solely on the music, blocking out everything else in the room. She had learned over the years that distraction and doubt could easily break a performance. So she concentrated on the feeling of the melody, the flow of harmony, and the rhythm that pulsed within her. She pressed the first key, then another, letting the notes rise and fill the room. The sound was soft at first, delicate but full of intent. She allowed herself to feel the music, letting it guide her movements, and soon she was completely immersed in the piece. As the music grew, she noticed the subtle reactions of the judges. Their eyes widened slightly, some leaning forward, pens pausing mid-note as they tried to capture what they were hearing. The other contestants were quiet, no longer whispering or laughing, their attention fully on her. She smiled faintly to herself, feeling a sense of satisfaction in knowing that her talent was being recognized. Not through words, but through the impact of her performance. She focused even more, letting her emotions flow through her fingers. Each note carrying a piece of her story, the middle section of the piece demanded greater control and expression. She allowed the dynamics to shift from soft, gentle passages to stronger, more dramatic chords. Her fingers moved fluidly, each touch intentional, shaping the music with care. She could feel the room responding, the energy in the air changing as the audience became more engaged. The judges' expressions revealed a mixture of admiration and surprise, and she noticed a few glances exchanged among them. Her music had completely captured their attention, and she felt the power of the connection she had created as she played. She thought about her journey, the countless hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the small victories that had led her here. She remembered the laughter she had endured, the subtle dismissals from people who did not understand her abilities. Those experiences had fueled her determination, and she allowed that energy to infuse her performance. Every note was a testament to her perseverance, every chord a reflection of her dedication. She wasn't just playing music. She was telling her story, and the room could feel it. The climax of the piece approached, and she allowed herself to intensify the emotion in her playing. Her fingers moved faster, more decisively, yet with precision and grace. The chords resonated deeply, creating a powerful impact that seemed to fill every corner of the room. She felt the attention of the judges and audience alike, their focus unwavering. The other contestants watched silently, some with expressions of amazement, others with a quiet acknowledgement of her skill. She was no longer just a performer in their eyes. She was an artist capable of commanding attention through pure emotion and talent. As the music reached its peak, she slowed slightly, allowing each note to resonate fully, giving space for the emotion to settle. The final chords were deliberate and strong, yet gentle, carrying a sense of resolution and completeness. She allowed the last note to linger, fading slowly into silence, giving the room time to absorb what had just transpired. The effect was profound. The audience, who had been fully attentive throughout, remained quiet for a moment, letting the impact of her performance settle. The judges were silent, their expressions thoughtful, clearly impressed by the depth and skill she had demonstrated. Finally, the room erupted into applause. It started quietly, then grew louder, stronger, more enthusiastic, until it filled every corner of the hall. She smiled, feeling a warm sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just recognition. It was validation of her talent, her effort, and her resilience. The laughter that had greeted her earlier performances was long forgotten, replaced by admiration and respect. She had transformed doubt into awe, skepticism into appreciation. Every second of practice, every moment of self-doubt, every effort she had put into learning and improving had led to this moment of triumph. The room around her was alive with subtle whispers and glances. She noticed a few contestants whispering to the judges, pointing toward her briefly before looking down. Some of the laughter from earlier had faded into quiet murmurings. She sensed that she had unsettled them, and a small thrill ran through her. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about showing that talent could not be judged by appearances alone. She adjusted her posture, sat up straighter, and prepared herself mentally for the next round. She had to stay focused, or the pressure could undo all the work. She could feel the tension in the air growing as the next performers began their auditions. Some were technically impressive, striking every note perfectly, hitting every rhythm on time. But she noticed something: they lacked soul. The way they played felt mechanical, like following a set of instructions rather than telling a story. She reminded herself that this was her strength. She didn't just play the piano. She communicated through it. She shared her feelings, her struggles, her joy, and her pain with every note. And that was something that no amount of technical skill could replicate. When the volunteer called her name again, she stood, smoothing her simple outfit as she walked back to the piano. This time, she felt a mixture of excitement and determination. She wasn't here to compete in a traditional sense. She was here to let her music be heard, to let it speak for her. She positioned herself at the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. The judges were watching, some with heightened interest, others still trying to maintain an air of neutrality. She didn't let it bother her. The music was hers, and she was ready to share it. As her fingers touched the keys, she felt a sense of familiarity and comfort. The piano was more than just an instrument. It was a companion, a friend that had been with her through every difficult moment. She pressed the first note gently, feeling it resonate through the room. It was soft, almost hesitant, but full of emotion. The sound carried, filling the space, and she noticed the subtle changes in the audience's demeanor. The judges leaned in slightly, their pens pausing mid-note as they listened. The other contestants, who had been confident moments ago, now watched her more closely, some with expressions of surprise. She allowed the music to flow naturally, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Each note was intentional, each chord carefully crafted to convey the story she wanted to tell. She didn't play for applause. She played for the moment, for the room, and for herself. As she moved through the piece, she could feel the attention of the audience solidifying. The earlier laughter completely replaced by awe and admiration. She played with a quiet intensity that drew everyone in, forcing them to listen, to pay attention, to feel. The room was completely silent, save for the sound of the piano. Even small noises like shifting chairs or coughs seemed to disappear. Her music had a presence, a weight that could not be ignored. She noticed a few judges exchanging glances, subtly nodding to each other. The effect she was having on them was undeniable, and it encouraged her to continue with even more focus. She wasn't rushing. She was letting the story unfold naturally, allowing the highs and lows to emerge in their own time. As the piece progressed, she could sense the emotions in the room changing. The energy shifted from polite observation to genuine engagement. She could feel the hearts of the audience leaning forward, connecting with the music, understanding the story behind it. Her own emotions were mirrored back to her in subtle ways, a tightening of the chest here, a glimmer of tears there, a quiet intake of breath at the right moment. The music was alive, and she was its voice. She took a brief pause in the middle of the piece, letting the final note linger in the air. The silence was palpable, filled with anticipation. No one moved, no one spoke, no one blinked too quickly. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next note to continue the story. She smiled softly, letting herself enjoy the connection she had created. It was a powerful feeling, one she had never experienced so intensely before. She felt like she was not just performing, but creating a shared moment. A fleeting but unforgettable memory for everyone present. Continuing the piece, she added subtle flourishes, soft dynamics, and gentle variations that highlighted the emotion behind the music. Her fingers moved effortlessly over the keys, guided by instinct and feeling rather than strict rules. Each note was a word, each phrase a sentence, each passage a paragraph in the story she was telling. She could feel the room responding, the energy shifting with every measure. She wasn't just playing notes. She was communicating directly to the hearts of those who listened. By the time she reached the final segment, she felt a surge of energy and confidence. She played with greater intensity, her emotions flowing freely through the keys. The judges were fully attentive now, their earlier skepticism completely gone. Some of the other contestants looked amazed, their earlier confidence replaced by awe. The music had transformed the room, turning doubt into admiration and curiosity into respect. She played the last notes slowly, deliberately, allowing each one to resonate and fade naturally. The final chord lingered in the air, powerful yet gentle, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. As she lifted her hands from the keys, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had not only played a piece of music, she had shared a part of herself, her journey, and her passion. The room was silent for a moment, letting the experience settle. Then, slowly the applause began. It started softly, hesitant, and grew steadily into a wave of genuine appreciation. She smiled, feeling a mix of relief and pride. She had faced the laughter, the doubt, and the judgment. And she had emerged not just unscathed, but victorious in her own way. She looked around at the judges and audience, noticing the respect and admiration in their expressions. The laughter from earlier seemed like a distant memory, replaced by recognition of her talent and dedication. She knew that this was only the beginning, that there were still challenges ahead, but in this moment she felt triumphant. Her music had spoken, and it had been heard. She returned to her seat, her hands still tingling from the effort, her heart full of confidence and hope. She had silenced the room, and in doing so, she had shown herself and everyone else the power of perseverance and passion. She returned to the waiting area, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her fingers still tingled from the intensity of her performance. Her heart beat rapidly as she replayed every moment in her mind. The room felt different now, charged with energy. She could sense the quiet conversations and glances that followed her every move. Contestants who had seemed so confident earlier were now subdued. Some staring at their own hands or fiddling nervously with sheet music. She tried to focus on her breathing, letting the music still echo in her mind, reminding herself that this was only part of the journey. The air in the waiting area was thick with tension. Some contestants whispered to each other, pointing subtly toward her, while others avoided eye contact completely. The earlier laughter and mocking had vanished, replaced by something else: curiosity, doubt, and even admiration. She could feel it, and it made her both nervous and proud. She reminded herself not to let it affect her focus. The competition wasn't over, and the next piece she would play had to be even stronger. She had to show not only skill, but emotion, depth, presence. She took out her notebook again, running her fingers lightly over the worn pages. Each scribble, each note represented hours of effort, late nights, and moments of frustration. She remembered sitting in her small room, practicing until her fingers ached, hearing the mistakes, but refusing to stop. Each failure had taught her something, and each success had been hard-earned. Now, she could see the results in the way the room had reacted to her first piece. It wasn't just applause. It was recognition. People were seeing her for who she truly was, not just what they assumed from appearances. As the next auditions began, she observed quietly. Some performers were precise, but mechanical. Others were loud and showy, trying to impress with speed and complexity. She realized that many were playing to be seen, not to be heard. That was her difference. She wasn't trying to dazzle. She was trying to communicate, to reach people through the language of music. She reminded herself to stay true to her own style, to play with honesty and emotion, rather than trying to compete on someone else's terms. When her name was called again, she rose slowly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She carried her music case firmly, walking with measured steps, each one echoing softly against the polished floor. She could feel eyes on her again, some curious, some skeptical. She didn't flinch. She had learned to embrace scrutiny, to let it sharpen her focus rather than weaken it. She approached the piano, adjusted her bench, and opened her notebook. Feeling the familiar comfort of the keys beneath her fingers, this was her world, and in this moment, she was in control. She arrived at the audition hall feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The building was bigger than she expected, with tall glass doors and a long corridor leading to the main room. The smell of polished wood and faint coffee from a nearby cafe filled the air. People were moving around quickly, talking in low voices, some carrying instruments, others adjusting sheet music or whispering to friends. She felt a little out of place. She wasn't wearing a fancy dress or shining shoes, just a simple outfit that made her comfortable. Her hands clutched the strap of her small music case tightly. She had been practicing for months, and though she tried to look calm, her heart was racing. As she walked further inside, she noticed other contestants. They looked confident, talking and laughing with each other, carrying expensive instruments or folders full of perfectly arranged sheet music. Some of them smiled politely at her, but a few didn't bother. She could feel their judgment, the way their eyes scanned her from head to toe, silently comparing. She felt the weight of their opinions, but she told herself to focus on her own purpose. She had worked hard, and no one could take that away from her. The waiting area was crowded. Chairs lined the walls, and people were sitting, practicing quietly, or watching the auditions already in progress through a small glass window. She found a corner to sit and opened her music case. Inside was her old, well-worn notebook filled with scribbled notes and pieces she had composed herself. It didn't look impressive to anyone else, but to her, it represented every hour she had spent learning, failing, and trying again. She touched the keys of her portable keyboard softly, testing the familiar feel under her fingers. The sound was modest compared to the grand pianos in the audition room, but it reminded her of home, of long evenings practicing alone when no one believed she could ever play like this. Some contestants were whispering to each other, and she caught a few giggles when they looked in her direction. It hurt a little, but she refused to let it break her focus. She reminded herself that people often laugh at what they don't understand, and maybe that was what she was about to show them. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, imagining herself at the piano, playing with all her heart. She pictured the room falling silent, the judges leaning forward, surprised by what they were hearing. It was a comforting image, one that steadied her nerves. Her turn came sooner than she expected. A volunteer called her name and she stood, gripping her music case tightly. Each step toward the audition room felt heavier than the last, as if the hall itself was testing her resolve. When she reached the large wooden door, she paused for a moment, listening to the sounds of other performances drifting through the air. Some were beautiful, some were technically perfect, and some were nothing special. None of them had the spark she was carrying, the emotion that lived in every note she had practiced. She pushed the door open slowly, trying to appear calm. Inside, the room was even larger than it looked from outside. Rows of chairs were arranged for the audience and judges. A grand piano sat in the center, gleaming under the lights. The judges were already seated, flipping through their notes, occasionally nodding to each other or whispering. Some glanced up as she entered, their expressions polite but neutral. She took a moment to observe them, noticing the way some seemed slightly impatient, while others appeared genuinely interested in what the next performer might bring. She walked toward the piano, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished floor. Some of the other contestants who were waiting watched her with barely concealed amusement. A few whispered to each other, and she could hear stifled laughter. She felt a twinge of discomfort, but she focused on the keys in front of her. This was her moment, and nothing else mattered. She adjusted the bench, set her music stand, and opened her notebook. The room felt colder now, or maybe it was just the tension in the air that made her shiver slightly. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, testing the response, feeling the familiar resistance and spring of each one. Her heart was still racing, but in a controlled way, like a drumbeat that matched her anticipation. The judges were looking at her, some curious, some skeptical. The whispers from the back had stopped now, replaced by a low hum of expectation. She could sense the mixture of doubt and interest in the room, and she smiled to herself. She was used to being underestimated, and now she was ready to turn that into strength. For a few moments she just sat there, letting the silence settle. She thought about all the mornings she had woken up before sunrise to practice, the evenings she had stayed up late perfecting every note, the times she had failed and tried again. Every struggle had led her here, to this very bench, with the piano ready for her touch. She imagined the music flowing from her fingers, filling the room with something unexpected, something unforgettable. Then she adjusted her posture, straightening her back and lifting her chin. The audience and judges were watching, waiting for her first note. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself focus entirely on the music inside her mind. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about sharing a piece of herself, her story, through sound. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. She took a slow, deep breath and reminded herself that she was ready. When she opened her eyes and looked at the piano, she felt a calm wash over her. The tension in the room was palpable, but she didn't flinch. The first notes she would play were small, deliberate, soft. She wasn't trying to shock anyone right away. She was letting them in slowly, giving them a glimpse of the depth she carried. And as she pressed the first key, the sound filled the air, simple yet clear, like a whisper that demanded attention. She felt a surge of confidence. This was it, the moment she had worked for, she continued, her fingers dancing over the keys, moving with a grace that came from years of practice and a heart full of passion. The room remained quiet, the judges watching closely, some leaning forward, surprised at the delicate but precise touch. The whispers and laughter she had felt before were gone, replaced by curiosity and anticipation. She was no longer just a contestant. She was a storyteller, letting her music speak where words could not. Every note, every chord carried a piece of her journey, her struggles, and her dreams as she played. She noticed subtle changes in the room, the way the judges' eyebrows raised slightly, the way the corners of their mouths twitched in surprise, the way the other contestants who had been smirking now looked more attentive. Her music was reaching them, moving them, breaking through the initial assumptions they had made about her. And in that moment, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She wasn't just performing. She was proving something, first to herself, and then slowly to everyone around her. She didn't rush. Each note had its place. Each pause had meaning. The music unfolded naturally, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment to be heard. The room seemed to hold its breath, listening intently. She could feel the energy shift, subtle recognition that what they had dismissed as a simple girl with a small case was actually someone extraordinary, and she smiled to herself, knowing that this was only the beginning of what she had to share. By the end of the piece, she felt a sense of calm triumph. She had arrived at the audition feeling uncertain, feeling small in comparison to others, but she had given everything she had. The first part of her journey was complete, and the room had witnessed the quiet strength she carried. As she lifted her hands from the keys, she looked around, noticing the small changes in expression on the judges' faces. Something had shifted, and she knew that her story was just beginning to unfold. As she left the piano for a brief pause, the room seemed to hold a strange tension. The other contestants whispered among themselves, their earlier laughter replaced by curiosity and, in some cases, disbelief. She could feel their eyes on her back, silently analyzing every movement. Her hands were still slightly trembling from the adrenaline, but she forced herself to take slow, measured breaths. She knew this was the hardest part, not the playing itself, but the scrutiny and judgment that came with it. She walked back to her seat, careful not to appear nervous. She placed her music case on her lap and opened it again, flipping through the sheets. Her mind wasn't on the music now, though. It was on the energy in the room, on the small shift she could feel happening around her. For a moment, she allowed herself to notice the small details. A judge leaning forward slightly, a contestant biting their lip in concentration, someone tapping a pencil nervously against a folder. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what she would do next. And the weight of that attention pressed down on her shoulders. Despite the pressure, she felt a strange sense of calm. The first piece had gone well. The notes had been true, the rhythm steady, and she had conveyed more than just sound. She had conveyed feeling. She allowed herself a small smile, remembering the long hours of practice. The early mornings and the evenings spent alone with her music, all of it had led to this room, this moment, and the knowledge that she could rise to the occasion was empowering. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the music still echo in her mind, letting it remind her why she was here.